What's your lemonade stand story?
And he was like, YouTube's going to be the next big thing, Devin. Like, you need to get on that. You need to get on it early. And I'm like,
And all of us, we all go through our own trials, our own level of stuff.
Sure hope this works out. Otherwise, this will be a huge waste of time.
I mean, what else is it all about other than just taking risks and continuing to try and grow and hopefully get better and better at making things?
Most of the billion-dollar brands you've seen were started by people that were just solving a problem for themselves.
We're telling lemonade stand stories from some of the world's top creators, makers, and go-getters.
We're rolling right now.
Hey,
We're having fun. We're rolling.
Yeah.
Hey guys, this podcast today is sponsored by Yalla, a task management and team collaboration software that we use at Lemonade Stand. We use Yalla to keep all of our team members organized, wherever they are. In fact, we used it to plan and organize this podcast. Visit yalla.team, that's YALLA.team, and try it for free. We also have a special offer for all listeners of this podcast. Use promo code LEMONADE and get a lifetime 25% off if you upgrade.
All right, I am rolling, and I am with my friend Dallas Jenkins here, who is he's in Chicago right now. Is that right?
I am indeed, the suburbs of Chicago. Yes.
Suburbs of Chicago, in a crazy time of life. But Dallas is an amazing human being. I've had the privilege of knowing him for probably a little over a year now, I would say. You know, I've known of you a little bit longer than that, but folks, if you guys aren't familiar with Dallas and his work, if you're familiar at all with the Chosen series, the biblical series about the life of Christ, which is doing extremely well on IMDb. If you look, it's rated so incredibly high. People are raving about it. Dallas is the creator of that show, and he's the writer, the director, the brainchild of it all. And honestly, I knew of Dallas because of VidAngel. I was working with VidAngel creating my own show. And while I was doing that, they were telling me about the first show that they were going to launch their platform on, the VidAngel platform on, which is The Chosen. And so they showed me like a 20-something minute pilot called The Shepherd, I believe. And so I saw that, and it was in its rough format too. It was like a rough cut. And even though it wasn't a rough cut, and I've seen plenty of rough cuts, I was so transfixed. I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm so into the characters. I'm so into the story. This is amazing. And then right after that, there was like a little invitation piece, I believe, by you telling people about what your plans are, your visions and all that stuff. And anyway, I got so excited, and I was like, man, I would love to audition for this in the future if that ever becomes a thing. And so through those means, I was able to get to know you, and it was great because it was The Shepherd. That's what I knew it from. So I kind of knew it from those beginning stages to what has happened now. But yeah, thanks Dallas for joining me. I know you're a busy guy, so we kind of jump in and chat. But yeah, thanks for hopping on board, you know. And
no, thanks for having me, and I appreciate the intro. And yeah, it's fun to kind of reminisce about back when The Chosen was just a 20-minute short film that I had made on my friend's farm in Illinois for my church.
Yeah.
And what's happened since then has been nothing short of miraculous. And I remember getting to meet you during that time because they knew we were looking for dark-skinned actors and whatnot. So they were like, hey, we already know someone. Here's someone you should check out. Yeah. And you've auditioned a couple times. Eventually you're going to get on the show. I know that. We just haven't quite found the right spot just yet.
Hey, well, if it's right, I will be stoked. I will be stoked for that. But I fully know, like, the actor side of me always wants to do stuff, but the producer side of me also knows, hey, when it's right, it'll be the right thing. So and Dallas, I was kind of telling you this, but this podcast has shifted a little bit from what I used to normally do. And we're going to call it the Lemonade Stand Podcast. And basically saying that everyone's got their lemonade stand story, right? When you're a little child and you're creating your first business, it usually is like a lemonade stand selling lemonade. So I want to kind of go into the beginnings of your career and what prompted you to be a filmmaker to begin with. So can you kind of walk us through that whole process?
Yeah, my father is an author, and he's the author of one of the biggest selling series of all time, the Left Behind series, which was huge in the late 90s and early 2000s. And so I grew up with a storytelling gene, and my father was also a big movie buff, and so we were a pretty strict Christian home, so I wasn't actually exposed to a lot of TV and movies growing up, other than sports. I was a huge sports buff, athlete. I wanted to either be an athlete when I grew up, or I wanted to be like a sports broadcaster. So I definitely had an interest in media, but it was primarily through the lens of sports. And then I did remember when I was growing up, I would see Christian media content, and I was noticing that it always seemed to be so much different and worse than any other regular media content that I saw.
For sure, yeah.
So I noticed that, but I didn't think much of it. I just thought, gosh, this kind of sucks. There's just, whenever I see stuff about Jesus or stuff about my faith, it's few and far between. But when I do, it's not nearly as interesting or as exciting as other stuff.
Some of like the more entertaining stuff, right?
For sure. So then when I was a freshman in high school, my dad started introducing me to classic films, and because he was a big movie fan, and I saw the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest when I was a freshman in high school.
Wow. Okay.
That's when everything changed. I remember just thinking, whatever that is, I want to do that. I want to arouse in audiences the kind of emotion that this scene in this movie and in this movie overall aroused in me, and that became my focus. Of I want to do that. I want to tell stories, and I want to make people feel something. And that was the genesis of it. And then when I was in college is when the Left Behind books really started to take off. And there was this company out of Louisville, Kentucky, this small little company that got the rights to the Left Behind books to make them into movies. And my dad said, well, my son is a aspiring filmmaker. And so they gave me a job as just a low-level secretary. So, you talk about lemonade stand. It wasn't my lemonade stand, but I was for sure like just the person who wrote the sign and passed out the drinks. I was not, I started out on the low end of the totem pole for sure. And then over the course of a couple of years, I worked my way up, just studying and working. And I figured I looked for things in the company that weren't being done well or gaps that they had in knowledge. And I sought to fill those gaps. I wanted to make myself valuable. And then by the time that they went to actually make the movie, my father and I could tell that it wasn't going to be the kind of movie that we wanted to see. We weren't excited about it. And so I left, and my dad and I started our own company called Jenkins Entertainment. And so in 2000, so that was finally my first official lemonade stand was our company. My dad had the means financially to finance a company like that. We weren't huge or anything, but Left Behind books were really going completely insane. I mean, millions of copies, every year. So one thing we saw when we looked around the industry, especially the independent film world, and especially the faith-based film world, was there was a lot of people talking about making movies, but not a lot of people actually making them. So there was a lot of this script is in the hands of this actor, or I'm working with this one person, we're developing a project. And we thought, well, it seems like something that could allow us to stand out and allow us to just get our foot into the door and establish a footprint is to just make a movie. Yeah. And so my very first film in 2000 was a film called Hometown Legend. Yeah. And it was a faith-based high school football film before that was cool. Now, since then, there's literally been like 10 faith-based football films, but we were the first. And so that was the good news, but the bad news was we were probably a little bit ahead of our time. The industry was still figuring itself out, the independent world, faith-based industry. However, I was 25 years old. I had never even really been on a film set. I think I visited one.
You just kind of just did this. You just went for it.
Yeah, we just went for it. And,
Amazing. Wow.
you know, so looking back on it, you know, it probably wasn't, when I think of all the decisions we made, it didn't turn out to be a perfect financial spend. I mean, the project didn't over the course of its lifetime, it didn't make a profit, but we just went for it. And I was 25. I visited a set of one of our producers to talk to him. That was the first movie set I'd been on, but we just did it. And it was a good movie. It wasn't a great movie, but it was a good movie. It's still viewed. And it got picked up by Warner Brothers, you know, one of the biggest studios in the world.
That's crazy.
And,
amazing.
Well, yeah, and back then, movies didn't have distribution avenues. You can just put them on YouTube or put them on any service. 90% of independent films never saw the light of day, and we actually got picked up by Warner Brothers. Actually paid us an advance, like a $400,000 check up front, and that, I mean, it was great. And the movie ended up getting in most countries around the world. It was translated into multiple languages. I had a friend who was in a hotel in China who saw it when he was there. I mean, it was great. So, and we learned a ton, obviously. I mean, I was thrown right into the fire, and I learned about, I didn't actually direct that one. I produced it. I worked with a director, and so, who was around my age. So we were both, you know, just young and optimistic and just went for it. And then after that, I directed a couple of short films, and over the course of the next 10 years, just had varying degrees of success with feature films, and did a project for the Hallmark Channel. Did set up a movie based on one of my dad's books for the Hallmark Channel. And yeah, so that's kind of, you were asking more about how I started, and I've started to take too far into the story, but
no, I mean, I love it, because the thing is like, it's so great to like see like how you went for it. And I love that attitude, because that's kind of how I position myself as an actor as well. Like I was like, you know what, no one's just going to give me a chance. I grew up when I first started out in the industry, I grew up in Utah. There just wasn't that many opportunities for Indian actors. You know, there just wasn't.
Sure.
So I had to create rules for myself. I had to just put myself in things, and I volunteered a lot to act in movies for free or whatever. And it was fine. It was great. And it got me exposure. And yeah, I love that attitude of like just kind of building a career that way by like going for it. And even now, like that's how I do things. Like I like to just create a pilot and stuff, because that's how things keep going. Now, a part of this whole podcast as well is like talking about some of the struggles you've had along the way. And I know like you've had some fairly big successes earlier on after this first film, and then you've also had some pretty big blows, but it's led you to where you're at right now. So can you talk a little bit about that journey as well?
Yeah, I would say I didn't have some big successes. I had some decent success. I was enough to make a living. It was enough to keep our company going. I was growing, and our footprint was expanding. And in 2010, I did a feature film called What If, which was a small, you know, low budget, faith-based film. But it did well. I mean, it's made money. We still get quarterly, you know, checks for it every year. I mean, even 10 years later, it's still popular and doing well in the faith-based space. But right after I made that movie, a megachurch in Chicago hired me to move out of LA back to Chicago, where I grew up, and to make the goal was to make movies within that structure, to get, you know, worldwide distribution, but to utilize the resources and the finances that big church had. And so I did that. And while I was there, it took a while to get going. And I did a couple of short films for our church's Christmas Eve or Good Friday services that were really strong and got some attention in the church and a little bit outside the church. But then the big break happened when one of my short films for our church's Christmas Eve service got in the hands of Jason Blum, who is one of the biggest producers in Hollywood.
He does horror movies though, doesn't he?
Yeah. So Blumhouse Productions is known for Get Out.
In fact, I did a horror film that was kind of associated with in that circle. So
So
but
yeah, they did.
I'd rather do more Christian stuff, but
Sure. Yeah, but the Conjuring and Sinister, and I mean, it was just, they're huge, and they're known for lower budget films that make hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yes.
And he wanted to dip his toes into the faith-based waters and see, because he saw there was an opportunity there.
Right.
And so he saw my short film and absolutely loved it. And there was a project that I was developing called The Resurrection of Gavin Stone, which was a project set in a church, very explicitly faith-based, but funny and compelling. I really liked it. And so they liked that script. They partnered with WWE, the wrestling company, who has a film division that's actually pretty successful.
Yeah.
And they put up the money. They put up all the money for the movie. And so a horror film company, a wrestling company, and a church in Elgin, Illinois, all combined to make this Resurrection of Gavin Stone. And we filmed it at our church in Chicago. And it went really well. And they loved the film. And then they tested the film, and it tested bigger than any of their movies that either company had ever done. Yeah. It was really, things were really looking up. And then they wanted to know what other ideas I had. And so they loved those. And so the plan was, I was going to be doing multiple faith-based movies for the next 10 years with some of the biggest producers in Hollywood, and Walden Media got involved, and Universal Studios. I mean, it was great. Yeah. And I was set. I was a director with a very bright future. And I had made it, which was primarily my goal. I mean, I think for years, my goal was to kind of be approved by Hollywood and to kind of make it. And this was my chance. And the great thing about it was I was telling the stories of my faith, which I didn't have to like sell out to be. Yeah.
This is what you wanted to do.
Yeah. And it was financed by others. And it was just perfect until it came out in theaters on Inauguration Day in 2017, and it was a complete bomb. It was lower than their lowest expectations. And within a couple hours, they were all kind of pulling out and saying, "Oh, I guess we don't know this world. We're going to go back to doing what we do best." Oh, no. And I went from a director with a very bright future to a director with no future in just a matter of a couple hours. And that was...
Sorry. And I remember I haven't seen Resurrection of Gavin Stone, but I know the lead that you got, wasn't he in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.?
Yes. Yeah. Brett Dalton was one of the stars of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
That's right.
He was the lead, and Shawn Michaels, one of the most famous, successful wrestlers of all time, was in the film and did a great job. We had a great cast. I mean, I'm very proud of the film. I still like it. It's not perfect, but people who've seen it really liked it, and there just weren't enough people who saw it. And so all of that made me very confused, because especially when things went so well leading up to it, and it seemed like God was really part of the process, part of the story.
Everything, right?
So many things went perfect, that when it failed, you go, "Oh, well, I guess God must not have been part of that. I guess maybe I was just wrong all along, and I guess I missed the boat on this and misunderstood misread the tea leaves." And so when I'm home alone with my wife on that Friday afternoon, we were confused. We were crying. We were devastated. I mean, just wondering, I put years into this, and it felt so right. And now it's just, I don't have a future in this business as of this moment. And I didn't know what was next. And in that moment, we were kind of going our separate ways. We were praying and trying to figure out what was going on. And God just laid it very, very explicitly and powerfully on my wife's heart, the story of the feeding of the 5,000. Okay. And then there was this phrase that she felt God was sharing with her, that just the phrase was, "I do impossible math." And, depending on your theology, depending on whether you're a believer or not, and as to whether God lays things on your heart or speaks to you, that's not, that everyone has their own personal relationship or not with God. But at the time, it just seemed very clear what God was sharing with my wife. And so we went into the story of the feeding of the 5,000 and in the Gospels, and read that again. And it's when Jesus the people that he's speaking to are hungry because he's been talking for so long over the course of a couple of days, and they've run out of food, all these people. And the disciples come to Jesus and they say, we need to send these people home because they're so hungry. And he said, no, we can't, because they're so hungry they'll faint along the way. And so they go and they find some food, and there's a boy that has 5 loaves and 2 fish, and then Jesus miraculously multiplies it, and it goes out to these 5,000 people. And one of the things that we noticed about the story that we had never noticed before, in all the hundreds of times we've heard that story, was that Jesus wasn't surprised by the fact that these people were hungry, and in many ways you could say he was responsible for it. He was responsible for the hunger
for sure
that led to the miracle. And so that made us feel a little bit better of like, okay, maybe God is in this process. We're hungry right now. We're starving.
Maybe you're in the middle of it and you didn't realize it,
Right.
The road, right.
But that doesn't mean that God's not present in it, and that maybe he even caused this. And then we thought, ooh, I do impossible math. Ooh, Jesus fed the 5,000. Ooh, that means that the box office numbers are going to turn around in a miraculous way.
Yeah.
And that these early returns, even though typically they predict exactly what's going to happen, well, maybe God's got something different in store. And that didn't happen. The box office numbers didn't turn around. It didn't get better. Nothing happened that indicated that God was doing something different with the numbers. And so we were pretty confused.
Yeah.
But we were content to be in this place of just waiting for God to make things clear. But it was still pretty devastating. That night at 4:00 in the morning, I was up doing what I do typically, and I'm guessing you've probably done this, and many listeners or viewers have done this, especially if you're a leader or a business owner. You do a postmortem. You analyze what went wrong. You figure out where you went wrong because you don't want to make the same mistake twice. So I was doing a 15-page memo, analyzing where I was at fault, where others were at fault, what I needed to do differently, what they needed to do differently. And a Facebook message popped up on my computer screen out of the blue from someone I've never met, just someone I've talked to on Facebook maybe once a year. And it didn't say hi. It didn't say hello. It didn't say, heard about your movie. It just said, remember, your job is not to feed the 5,000. It's only to provide the loaves and fish.
Oh my gosh.
And I thought, wow, was my computer recording what my wife and I had been saying that day? I mean, I was genuinely, I couldn't figure out where this came from. And I said to him, what are you doing up at 4 a.m?
Yeah.
He says, well, I'm in Romania. I'm on a different time zone. I'm visiting my brother. And I said, if you don't mind my asking, before I answer or say anything, why did you tell me that?
Yeah.
And he said, oh, that wasn't me. God just wanted me to share that with you.
Oh.
And that was the moment where my life truly, truly changed. I can define who I was before that moment and who I was after, because number one, it confirmed that God was involved and present in this circumstance. Number two, it put me on a course to really follow this philosophy of when that boy brought the food to Jesus, the 5 loaves and 2 fish, and Jesus accepted them as worthy, as good and healthy, as worthy of multiplication. That exchange ended for that boy. That's all that boy was responsible for. Mm-hmm. And the disciples who went and found it. That was all they were responsible for. And so, yes, God still has us do our part, and we are still responsible to make sure that the loaves and fish are as good and healthy as they can be, that whatever we do provide whatever's in front of us. And then, of course, when Jesus multiplied that, he still had the disciples distribute the fish and the loaves. So it's not like we're left out of the process and we just sit around and wait for some big miracle. However, the exchange is complete when God accepts whatever we bring. And whatever happens after that is not up to us, and it's not our business. And so for me,
you give him.
I'm sorry?
You give him the outcomes. You let the Lord take.
Right. Right. And you can't be responsible for the success or failure of it if what you brought to the table, and this is true again, even if you're not a believer, you, as an artist, many artists will tell you this, you can't control the outcome. You can just make yourself better. You can work hard. You can deliver what's true and what's good and what's right, and then move on to the next piece. And so I was really in a place where I was willing to do that, and I was excited, and I would be fine if I never made another film again. I got to that place. I just wanted to be in God's will. I wanted to make sure that whatever I did bring to the table was as good and healthy as that it could be, which is what made me open-minded to doing a short film for my church's Christmas Eve service again. And that was the one that you ended up seeing, the short film about the birth of Christ from the perspective of the shepherds. And it sure felt like a step down from doing a big feature film with big producers. This was just a small loaf and a small fish, but I poured myself into it. And very, very long story short, it got in the hands of VidAngel, a streaming service. And while I was making it, I had this idea for a multi-season show about the life of Christ, which has never been done. There's been movies and miniseries, but there's never been a multi-season show. And they heard that idea. They saw the short film. They freaked out, and they said, "We think this could be big, but we want to raise the money through crowdfunding," which I thought was ludicrous. I thought it would never work. Yeah. I thought we'd be lucky to get $1,000. Crowdfunding only works for small projects, and then the big ones that have broken like the all-time crowdfunding records of like 5.7 million, which was the record at the time, were done by projects with big fan bases. They had already existing IP and a crowd that was really excited. We had
type of situation, right? Like a Veronica Mars,
right.
Like that. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And Mystery Science Theater 3000, those were the two record holders. And I had nothing. I was coming off of a career disappointment. We had no fan base, no Facebook page, no nothing. And that short film ended up going viral and leading to us shattering the all-time crowdfunding record, raising over $10 million from 19,000 people around the world. And I remember when we were sitting at the computer, my wife and I were looking at the fact that we hit that $10 million mark, and we knew that we could make season 1, all 8 episodes, and that it was going to be exactly what we needed, and that we'd shattered the all-time crowdfunding record. She looked at me with tears in her eyes, and like a bolt of lightning, just like what had happened a year before, she said, "I do impossible math." Mm-hmm. And we started, she's like it was just as clear as day. God was putting it on her heart again. That's what he meant by that. And that has been the hallmark of this whole project. I'll skip ahead for just a second. I mean, just several months ago, we made the show completely free, completely delay free, no restrictions, no delays, all 8 episodes completely around the world. And in the middle of COVID, and we've generated 4 times, 5 times the income that we were before once we made it free. Yeah. And that's impossible math. And that's what's been this whole show since the lowest moment of my career is almost assuredly responsible for what's currently happening with this show, which has been going crazy.
Dude, my goodness. I mean, I could listen to this podcast. I mean, I am a listener of you. Like, this is unbelievable stuff, because it really shows how, if you put your trust in him, and that's my belief. That's always been my belief as well. Like, just what can actually happen instead of trying to handle all the outcomes yourself, And
but here's an important point to make, though, too, is a lot of times we then mean, oh, if you really put your trust in God, big miracles will happen and big success will finally happen. And that's not always the case. I don't believe that the resurrection of Gavin Stone, that God wasn't involved and that I wasn't trusting God. He just had a different plan than what I thought it was. And I think that's the thing, is you can't think too much about trying to feed the 5,000. You also can't think too much about not feeding the 5,000. You can't think, well, if God uses this and it becomes really successful, then that means that I was doing what God wanted me to do. And if it doesn't succeed, then that means I wasn't, or that I failed in some way. And that it doesn't necessarily mean that. We just have to have a different economy of what success actually means when it comes to our art.
I love that, because the thing is like, if we let our definition of success be like monetary value, or how many people view this, or how many, or am I getting more acting jobs, or are you getting more directing jobs and things like that? If that is our definition, then prepare for disappointment, because the truth is like, those are our expectations. I mean, no one would have thought in 2020 the world would be shut down, right? Like I remember thinking starting 2020, this is the year, man. Like we're gonna start do some really cool things. I had a web series in the works. I had all these things, and who knows, things may still happen. But the point is God, like you said, does do impossible math, and gosh, I mean, I could just, there's so many aspects of the story I could keep talking about. One thing I wanted to talk about real quick regarding The Chosen itself. When I read the scripts, because I had a chance to read them before I auditioned, I was so impressed. Like you're an incredibly talented writer, and I really was engaged, and I loved even like seeing the episodes come out and seeing how realistic it feels. I really feel like a deep connection to the show. But not only do I feel it, like tons and tons and tons of people around the world feel that same connection, right? They're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So what was it about this show, or how do you feel like you were able to execute on this show that helps speak to people's emotions? Because this ties exactly back to your vision you wanted back in 9th grade, right? Like you were able to arouse those emotions.
Exactly. That's a good point. Yeah, it's funny. I hadn't fully made that connection but you said you talk about emotions. And I think that's been the key to the show, is that a lot of faith-based content and a lot of Jesus content, Bible projects, have had spiritual accuracy and spiritual resonance, because they typically, especially Bible projects, are oftentimes just reenacting the Bible, and the Bible has spiritual resonance. But there's, and a lot of times there's intellectual resonance, because whether you're hearing a sermon or you're watching a documentary or you're reading the Bible or whatever it is, you can or studying the history of that time, there can be an intellectual resonance. There's very rarely, I can count on one hand, the number of times that I've had any kind of emotional reaction to a Bible project. And most of that probably came from The Passion of the Christ, which focused on one kind of singular moment.
Yes,
and they took their time on that moment, whereas most Bible projects just rush through miracle to miracle, Bible verse to Bible verse, and you don't get a chance to connect with the people involved. You don't get a chance to know them, so there's no emotional resonance. And The Chosen, I think, is impacting people around the world. Mm-hmm. And it's also impacting people regardless of age, regardless of gender, regardless of culture, skin color, faith tradition. I mean, I can't think of a project like this that has united, at least in its fandom, LDS, Catholic, Jewish, evangelical viewers. They get together and then they start arguing about theology and all the things that happened after Jesus was there. But I think that it's because of the emotional resonance. I think that when you're seeing Jesus through the eyes of those who actually met him and were changed by him, and you identify with and connect with, and we take the time to portray their struggles, both personally and in the history and culture of that time, then when the impact happens, when the miracle happens, when Jesus steps in, it's not just spiritually resonant, it's not just intellectually resonant, but it's emotionally resonant. And it's our hearts that typically compel us to action. And you're seeing that just even in the world right now with the protests or with the reactions to COVID. It is, you can look at statistics all day long. And in fact, statistics right now don't even really matter to either side. And people will say, get rid. I don't want to hear your facts and figures. I'm feeling something important right now, and I need to express it. And emotion spurs action, and emotion spurs response. And so people within the context of a Jesus show, they are finding even more spiritual resonance, and they're reading the Bible more than ever because of their emotional response to the show. And emotions should never come at the expense of truth, and they should never come at the expense of what's spiritually important, but they can be a guide and a propellant into what's true, and especially and hopefully it's a response to what's true.
Yeah. Well, I know we don't have much more time. In fact, we might even be over time a little bit.
We got a couple minutes. It's okay, but
okay.
Yeah.
Well, Libby, I just want to kind of wrap up with a couple of thoughts or a couple of questions real quick. In regards to emotions connecting us to truth, I'm just a big proponent of truth equaling, well, I mean, I don't know, this is kind of an interesting way of looking at it, but like, I find that the things that are true, like found in the scriptures and whatnot, bring me a sense of pure joy, you know, and for me, that joy is like kind of what connects me and like holds me onto like my scriptural, my beliefs in Jesus and whatnot. Is there is a joy that comes to it.
Sure.
So, what has brought you joy, in especially during a time of craziness? Like, what has brought you joy and centeredness, and whatnot?
Yeah, I want to make sure I clarify. I think I misspoke 2 minutes ago when I said emotions can kind of drive you to truth. They can, but I think it's more important that emotions are in a reaction to truth, because I do think our emotions, when in a vacuum, can sometimes betray us. But I think that when they're a response to truth, then that's where true joy comes from, like you mentioned. And there's a difference between joy and happiness. Happiness is a temporary state. And right now, I'm not very happy. Right now, and my wife and I talk about this, it's almost, you almost feel depressed right now. I've never struggled with depression, but there's just this weight, just constantly. When you wake up and you go to bed at night, there's just this weight of the tension in society and the anger and then of course we're coming on the heels of and still in the midst of a global pandemic, and even that has become politicized, and we're arguing about that. And I'm not happy, but I'm joyous. And what brings me joy is when I am A, in God's will, B, when I'm doing truthful things. And I believe that this show is truthful, and I believe that my life with my family and my wife and my kids, that's truth. I've spent more time than ever with my family in the last couple months. That's brought me joy. But I can tell you that being in this place of realizing that it's not my job to feed the 5,000, it's only provide the loaves and fish, is most responsible for my joy over the last 3 years. In fact, I said it. I did a Facebook post that went kind of mini viral for a personal post. It wasn't I wasn't doing it on a big page that has millions of followers, so it didn't go truly viral. But I just posted this on my own personal Facebook page, and this kind of just like, a couple pages of thoughts, all in the midst of my pain of the failure of my movie. And I said, but I'm truly at peace, and I truly have joy, because I truly am in this place of knowing that whatever I do, as long as I'm bringing loaves and fish that are healthy and good, I'm genuinely okay with whatever happens. And that is the difference between joy and happiness. And that is what a relationship with Christ can bring you, is a sense of joy in the midst of circumstances that don't feel joyous, and a sense of peace even when there's chaos. And that's what I feel like, that's what I know that I have right now.
Yeah. Oh man, Dallas, I love that, because, one of the things that I've been really focusing on myself is authenticity or truth, like you're saying, and for me, I found that my personal relationship with Christ is like the only thing that really brings me like that kind of abounding joy, right? And that feeling of like, hey, you know what? I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I have no idea. I have no idea how, and this future is becoming more and more uncertain. And I look at the media, I have no idea what to believe. But at the same time, it's like I find that this joy through Christ kind of centers me, and it kind of binds me down in a sense, in the best way possible. Meaning I don't have to, even though I'm not completely happy, even though I'm very uncertain about a lot of things, at least I can have that joy with me. And as long as, like you said, doing your part, not being completely responsible for the 5,000, just doing what you're meant to do, it's unbelievable. So last question, Dallas. Last question. What would you tell your younger self, or like the future generation?
Yeah, I think you could probably guess what that is at this point. I would say it's not your job to feed the 5,000. It's only to provide the loaves and fish. I wish I would have heard that when I was in my 20s. It would have saved me a lot of stress and a lot of. I think it just would have saved me from being a control-oriented type person. And so, right now with The Chosen, we've had a ton of success. The show is exploding. Income is coming in that's going to allow us to finance future episodes and seasons. But I still don't know where season 2 is going to be filmed. We still don't have all the money just yet. COVID is tough to navigate through. We don't know exactly how we're going to make sense of all that. And I'm totally cool. I'm totally fine with it. Because I know that I'm just doing my part, and where we're at in 5 years is none of my business. Where we're at in 2 months is none of my business. So we'll figure that out, or God will reveal that to us over the next couple of weeks. So that's why I want. That's definitely what I would have tell myself, my younger self.
Yeah, and which helps you to relax a little bit, and just know that, hey, if God can help this planet spin in orbit and go around the sun, He can take care of circumstances here on Earth as well. So
absolutely, well said. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, Dallas, thank you so much for taking the time and chatting with me. I know you're a busy guy, but seriously, I've loved getting to know you. I look forward to working with you when the time is right. I love working with your producers as well. Like I've had great conversations with some of your producers. They're great. And you're doing some great stuff. I really appreciate your work, and God bless, man. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for listening to the Lemonade Stand podcast, and we hope you enjoyed this episode. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you use to be alerted when we release new episodes. We'd also love to hear your feedback in the reviews, and if you or someone you know has an awesome Lemonade Stand story, please reach out to us on social media and let us know. Thanks so much, and have a great day.